I want to call this Thursday, February 29th, Rules Committee meeting to order. Melvina, could you do invocation, please?
Father, we just thank you for this day that you have brought us back together again. We thank you for all your blessings.
Shelley, would you do roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mike Shambaugh.
Here.
Johnny Kidwell. Sasha Black Fox Qualls. Here. Danny Callison. Here. Julia Coates. Joe Deere. Mike Dobbins. Kevin Easley. Here. Lisa Hall. Darrell Legg. Here. Dora Petzkowski. Here. Cody Poindexter. Joshua Sam. Here. Melvina Shotpouch. E.O. Smith. Condessa Teehee. Victoria Vasquez. We have a quorum.
Okay, if you've had a chance to look at the minutes, could I have a motion, please?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, first up in reports, we have from the Marshal Service, Shannon Buell.
Good afternoon. Besides my monthly report, some of the things going on at the Marshal Service, one of the targeting focuses that we're going to do this year is on autism awareness. We're always looking at ways to integrate marshals in the community to make community safer and also to make the community feel safer. And what we found is sometimes the interaction between people with autism and the police are sometimes very negative, and not because of the police, but just they don't know how to operate. So we're bringing a team in to teach our officers how to work around people with autism. Too, we're looking at ways to either a sticker or something like that that we can give out to people with autism they can put on their car. And then we'll train the local agencies around our 14 counties that if this sticker's on a car, when you go up to do a stop on them, that there might be a person with autism in the car. So we're looking at that. We're looking at stress bags, stuff that we can have in the car in our units to be able to give to that child or person with autism to help them lower their stress when this interaction is occurring. So those are some of the things we're doing with that. Other than that, besides the monthly meeting rules, is there any questions I can answer?
Does anyone have any questions for Marshal Buell? Councilman Callison.
Yep, Marshal, with saying that, do you guys have a negotiator that's got mental health training that will be able to go into one of those situations and do these things with? Do we have somebody on the force that's able to do that?
So we have 4 certified negotiators. They've all been through the basic autism awareness class, but we'd definitely be looking at if there's any advanced class that those 4 individuals go to. But yeah, we've had 4 pretty highly trained negotiators that can do suicidal subjects that have mental disorders. Let's say they're having a bad day at wherever, we can deal with that. And then they also do the normal, armed and barricade gunman resolution. They do the hostage resolution, that kind of stuff, but they also can do the mental health stuff as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Condessa.
At our last gathering, there was some discussion about the situation with the GRDA, and I was wondering if you would kind of give us a bit of an update on how that has proceeded since the since that change has occurred.
Well, let me be very clear. I'm not happy with the GRDA pulling their commission cards from us. Okay, I do believe it comes from the governor after talking with members of GRDA that it's a policy that's being brought out there. Any time that you have cooperative agreements, it benefits the community in which those cooperative agreements are written. That's the purpose for a cooperative agreement. So everybody, one side of the agreement, the other side of the agreement, and the community that the agreement is supposed to protect understands the playing field, understands what's going to happen. And when one side or the other pulls that, it leaves fuzziness, it leaves gray area, it leaves cloudiness within that community of what's going on here. Can we do this? Can they not do that? And that's always a negative impact to the communities that we swore to protect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I know that In Indian country, there is typically multi-layered jurisdictions that are happening, whether you're talking about, municipal, state, federal, tribal. And so it's very important for all of these law enforcement entities especially to work together as partners in the community. And it is very unfortunate that GRDA made that move, but I appreciate the update and you speaking to that issue as well. All right, thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? I'll just equate that to this. The state of Oklahoma does very little for themselves in as far as law enforcement. They rely on counties and cities and they rely on a lot of different people to make the state run. So knowing that, what would they do if a county decided not to pull their commission with the state and not help do anything out in the state? It's really the same thing, and I don't understand the concept of not putting their selves in our shoes, because in the end, it's all about, serving the people and keeping everybody safe. So they should understand that doing that is not safe for anybody. And I just thought that's just kind of ridiculous, because they're treating us way different than they would ever treat anybody else. So if there's no other questions, appreciate your report, Marshall.
Thank you very much.
All right, from the Office of the Attorney General, Chad Harshaw.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the council. As you are all aware, I have several items that I've brought forward on the agenda this month. These items are significant, and as always, my office has put a lot of effort and work behind considering these topics carefully with thoughtfulness and respect of the history surrounding these provisions. In particular, one item that I'm proud to discuss with you all today is the issue of a tobacco compact. There's been a lot of discussion on this topic over the years. There's been action by the Oklahoma legislature with veto overrides in some instances. And as we all know, it's been a difficult and challenging time to have faithful discussions on these topics over the past several years. And I'm pleased to announce that conversations have been ongoing with the governor's office by and through myself and their counsel to reach and discuss the details of what longer-term compacting could look like. And with respect to the tobacco compact, which I've discussed with all of you and in front of you today, we're successful in reaching terms that would put that issue to rest for the next decade, potentially longer. I know this item's coming up later in the agenda, so we can discuss it in more detail then, but we also have the matter of the Constitution Convention, which is a unique component of our Constitution that may be the most significant piece of legislation that I've ever worked on. And so I look forward to discussing that as we move forward in the agenda and what that means going forward. We have a lot of other matters that we're monitoring in the AG's office. We have significant pieces of litigation, both at the federal level, 2 cases pending at the Oklahoma Supreme Court, which I like to update you all on these monthly meetings. One is the Strobel case, which relates to individual taxation of Native Americans. The other is a litigation between the legislature and the governor with respect to the veto override that I mentioned just earlier. Those cases have all been fully briefed. Oral argument has been held and concluded, the record closed, and anticipate decisions coming down on those 2 cases any day now. And as soon as I receive an update on that, of course up to the Supreme Court to determine their timing, we'll be circulating updates and notes to the council, the resolution of those cases. Other than that and the other items I know that are coming up for discussion further down the agenda, if there's any questions that anyone has, I'd love to take them.
Does anybody have any questions for General Harshaw? Dora?
Yes, AG, I would like to know, was the governor's Native American Affairs liaison in any way involved in the tobacco compact negotiations?
Not to my knowledge. The conversations that have been had between the state and the Cherokee Nation were exclusively between myself as the Attorney General and the General Counsel for the governor as the respective negotiating parties. So to my knowledge, there was no involvement. It was a discussion between us two trying to work through some of these difficult issues and put together a long-term resolution.
Thank you. Thank you.
Candace.
As always, there are a diversity of opinions that exist on how things are to proceed when it comes to things at Cherokee Nation. I think people have often said that if we all agreed, we wouldn't all be Cherokee, right?
Fair.
And so, however, I would contend that there's some misinformation that is being stated in some opposition to the agreement. And one measure of misinformation that is being communicated by various parties within our online communities and within our communities is that this compact is an erosion of Cherokee tribal sovereignty. And so would you speak directly to that claim?
Sure, and I would say that that's an inaccurate statement. This agreement, like all compacting matters, is an exercise of finding areas where you can't agree on. Part of the issue that has come up, not just in this compact, but others that have circulated over the past several years is, the way that Indian country is characterized and the way that it's not. This compact expressly preserves all rights with respect to the state and with respect to the Cherokee Nation on the issue specifically of reservation and what that means. What this compact does do is continue to exercise the authority over the areas that we always have, trust and restricted property, and those areas where you have retail tobacco locations that have been around for a long time, with infrastructure and investments that have been made by Cherokee citizens and the Cherokee Nation. So I don't agree with that statement. I think that this compact reflects continuing to the same regulatory scheme that we have for those facilities across the Cherokee Nation, and I don't believe it does anything to erode our sovereignty.
Okay, so with this being a continuation of a regulatory scheme, and this is applicable specifically to sales of tribal tobacco, there has also been some misinformation that has been stated that this is going to have a chilling effect largely on individual economic development in the Cherokee Nation. Would you also speak to that?
I don't believe that's an accurate statement either. This compact is limited to the regulation, sale, and collection of tax revenue specifically and only for tobacco. It applies to retail facilities that are already in existence or those that may be created down the road, as we have regulated it historically at the Cherokee Nation on trust and restricted property. So I don't believe this will have a chilling effect on any matter, tobacco or otherwise, as it speaks to specifically regulating what is a heavily regulated industry across the state, including in our reservation and specifically only tobacco.
Right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions that I've had. I sometimes am frustrated at the ways in which individuals will take action that is being undertaken on the behalf of the Cherokee people that is a simple extension of a regulatory framework that is already existing, and try to couch that as some kind of a unnecessary or untoward action by Cherokee Nation tribal government. Cherokee Nation tribal government, our body, the council, we're always seeking to act in the best interest of the Cherokee people. And we're trying to look generations ahead. This compact, I believe, is looking 10 years ahead. And so we are good partners. Cherokee Nation is a good community partner, and we act in good faith. And so I understand it has been a lengthy process to get to this point where we have a compact we are willing to sign because we didn't want to sign anything that erodes our tribal sovereignty. So I thank you, General Harsha, and thank you for the time, Speaker.
Councilman Callison.
Yeah, Mr. Harsha, is there any way, money-wise, that we would go somewhere to find out what we have given the state? I know it's a 50-50 deal, but any way we know for, like the last maybe 2 or 3 years, how much that cut has been to them and how much,
Sure.
what it's been? I mean, I know we don't have that here on the deal, but is that some way we could get to the council if, in that way, that would give us an idea of how much finances has went through the stateway and where we go there?
Absolutely. So part of the management of tobacco retail sales under the compact and at the Cherokee Nation includes significant oversight by our Cherokee Nation Tax Commission. They receive that information on a monthly basis. I believe a lot of it is reported on a monthly basis in Tax Commission reports, but that's definitely information that we keep as part of our record management of operating under the tax compact that we have now and will have in the future. So yes, that information is available.
Anybody else? I'd just like to congratulate you on your successful negotiation of this compact. General, I know that it's coming up. I know that there's not a whole lot to say, and maybe I'll say most of it right now is I know that our motor vehicle tax is coming up. I know you're in negotiations with that. That might be a little tougher deal, but do you have any idea for a time frame when maybe a decision is maybe made on that?
I mean, this is an issue that I've had some conversation on, and moving past the tobacco compact will be a significant effort that it will be high on my priority list. It has been my experience that the negotiator on behalf of the state is a sincere person. I think we see that reflected in the fact that we were able to reach an agreement that makes sense and is, in my view, in the best interest of the Cherokee Nation and appropriate to execute. And so I'm hopeful that those conversations will be fruitful and intend to take that matter up in earnest.
Well, I appreciate your leadership and Chief's leadership yesterday at the state capitol, and it was pretty well spelled out what this would entail if this motor vehicle compact didn't come, into fruition, in that, Tulsa Public Schools could lose in excess of $1 million at the snap of a fingers. When you think about all the money that we get in our schools, $800,000, $900,000, I mean, that's a lot of money that our schools rely on, and our police departments, all the funding that we give our police departments. I mean, that is really going to affect us too. So, it is a big deal, but, you have every amount of faith in you, and I know you'll do whatever you can do, and, we will back you 100%. You did a good job on the tobacco.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, sir. All right, up next from FOIA and GRA is Gwen Terrapin.
Good afternoon. It's good to see all of you today, and my apologies for missing the meeting back in January. And on a personal note, I would like to say thank you to our counselors from Districts 1, 2, and 3 for your generous donation to our band program for Tahlequah. I'm a grandparent, so we appreciate it, the boosters appreciate it, and we appreciate all of your support for all of the different programs in each of the communities. Without it, they wouldn't have near the things that they do, so we appreciate it. With that, you guys have my report. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Gwen? Condessa.
This isn't quite germane to the agenda, but the ladies of Cherokee County stand together, united and strong, and we're always happy to support our Tahlequah citizens.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next, from the Tax Commission, Sharon Swepston. That is not Sharon.
Good afternoon. My name is Chelsea Fisher. Sharon apologizes for not being here today, but you do have her report, so I will take any questions or comments back to her.
You have any questions for Chelsea? Darrell?
Hey, Chelsea, thank you for coming today. I guess maybe you can get the information that Councilman Callison,
Yes.
and if you would, just maybe email that to Gail, and she can distribute that to everybody. Appreciate it.
glad to.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, it's your first time in here. You got to tell us who you are and what you do.
Okay. I am a imaging manager for the Tax Commission. I handle the records and the backside of the Tax Commission. Basically, I don't deal with the front. So I deal with the records part of it.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, ma'am. It's nice meeting you.
Thank you.
All right, next from the Gaming Commission, Audra Imhoff.
Hi.
Hello.
I first just want to say thank you for just putting me in this interim position. I'm happy to be here and grateful for the opportunity. And I did submit my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Does anybody have any questions for Audra? Well, they're going to let you off easy for your first time up here.
I appreciate that.
All right, you have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
And from Human Resources, Samantha Hendricks.
Good afternoon. I just have a few announcements to make. One is for the open interviews. We still are continuing to do those on Tuesday between 2 and 4. We have moved the location to the Human Resource Office here in Tahlequah. So we're able to, so when somebody says, where's those at? You can tell them where that location's located, and we'll be happy to visit with them. So, and not only about interviews, but also with any interviews that happen with the hiring manager. So other than that, you have my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Samantha? Darrell?
Hey, Samantha, good to see you.
Thank you.
After Chief signed the executive order on doing the hiring of participants, what does the process look like now for that? Is it something, a box that they check?
It
when
is.
they go online? And
It
then-
is. We actually updated our application process so we can identify those. Otherwise, it all goes out with all the other applicants.
Gotcha.
So that is part of that preference that we talk about as far as, but yes, we do have a way to recognize them and identify them to the hiring manager.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Callison?
Have we had our split yet with health?
We're working on it. We're very, very close. So we have 10 that we've actually either hired or designated over to health. And then, of course, we have our government that we're supporting also as far as on that piece. So we're very excited about that. So we're getting there. It just takes a little time to make sure we hire the right person for the right job, so.
Anybody else? EO?
As I know, we don't discriminate on age and everything, but in your reports, is there seem to be an incline in younger people applying for jobs compared to a while?
I know it's not in the report. We don't, look as far as on age, but I'd have to look at that and get back with you on it.
Well, I was reading an article the other night, and it made me wondering if we were missing out on, and I know we do everything we
Yeah.
can to get as many young people
Right.
involved in everything, but
Yeah.
it'd be curious to see what the age deal is. It's nothing big, but I just
Sure.
wondered. Thank you.
We have adjusted our processes to do text to apply, to try to really entertain that audience for the younger generation, and also try to help the others that are kind of tech or challenged, to try to help them with that process. So we're trying to play toward all audiences on our application process. So, yeah.
That it? Councilman Sam?
Thank you, Chair. I guess kind of piggyback off EO's there. I've had some calls about folks wondering about, I guess, remote from work, kind of work from home type scenarios, and that might be an area where some of the younger ones, they might have a hard time with finding childcare. Have we identified any jobs within our workforce that could be remote, or then advertise those out there for folks?
We have. There's not as many. Of course, obviously, we try to be on site to help with the citizens and who's applying for positions, as far as from an HR perspective. But yes, there are some that are designated as remote, yes.
Sasha?
Thank you. Has there been any progress on posting the open and closing dates on those job announcements?
We are still working on that. We're working on a little bit of a technology challenge on that piece. We can put the openings and the closings on the back side, but we're trying to get that to where it's located. You're talking about the external, not the
Yes.
internal, right?
Yes,
Right,
correct.
yes.
Okay.
So we are very much in suit of that answer.
And approximately, what's the duration from once an applicant is selected and sent back to HR, that selection's been made, from the time that they start? Are we decreasing on that timeframe?
We
or-
are. We're actually, we've decreased it quite a bit since for the last couple of years. So, and we have some other avenues that we're exploring to actually pull that down more. So it's not just once the offer's made, and of course, the communication needs to happen, and then we need to, yes, the answer is yes, we are working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you.
All right, old business, none pending. New business,
Yes, Mr. Speaker, on item 1, I would like to make a motion to table this for 1 month since Vivian Cottrell is attending an exhibit out of town. Put that in form of a motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? All right. Yes, ma'am. Okay, Councilman Deere, would you take this, please?
This resolution confirming the reappointment of Rail Keeter as an advisory member of the Cherokee National Treasure and Advisory Committee. I put that in the form of a motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Are they here? All
I would
right,
like
where
to
are they?
request to be added as a sponsor.
Okay, bring them up. Yeah. Turn him on. All right, sir, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. I'm
Tell-
Burl Keeter
Yeah.
of Muskogee, Oklahoma, educated through the Muskogee school system, University of Tulsa, and University of Heidelberg in Germany. So that's the background I have, mostly rural. From Adair County, out of Stillwell, out around Caney Creek and Mulberry Hollow. But that's pretty much the background. I have no children, but was married, and the wife has been deceased for six to 8 years. And so that's the background that I have. And most of my area has been in the education area and the legislative area, along with ranching that I conduct at west of Stillwell. So here I am standing before you.
Yes, does anybody have any questions or comments? Now, you're up for reappointment, right? You've already been.
I'm old enough that I don't hear well.
Okay. All right, Deputy?
Yes. Hey, Burl, I just wanted to say to the crowd,
You're gonna have to
Would
get
someone
closer.
repeat for me?
Get closer.
Victoria Vasquez, Burl, I just wanted to tell the crowd that I have watched several of your exhibits.
I have a hearing difficulty.
Okay. It's Counselor Vasquez. She's saying she has seen several of your exhibits.
And
Oh, I see.
he does a fine
Well, I
job,
appreciate
and he's
that.
also done a great job
That
on
is
the.
my fondest thing, is to do the art of flint lamping.
He's good.
Apparently, I've done quite well of it on it in some areas, but so far as making any fundamental exchange with it, I sell very little of it. I sell some, but most of the time it's gifts that I make, and I enjoy doing it.
All right.
So that's pretty much my artistic background, and of course the ranching background and the business background from education. I've been through the Heidelberg University in Germany. I think I said that.
Okay.
That part I enjoyed. I spreken ze Deutsch not well, but I could go through the guest house and enjoyed those at the time. I was in the military there.
All right. Let's vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. Congratulations, sir. Glad to have you. All right. Number 3. Candessa?
This is the Verna D. Thompson Early Childhood Education Act of 2021, 2024 amendments, and I put this forward in the form of a motion. Before we move to a vote, could we have some discussion?
We are going to have discussion, yes. Chief, did you have something to say?
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to answer questions or respond to any concerns that may be within the act. I stand ready to do so.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, or we'll have discussion now. Does anybody need to have anything to ask?
Just have me as a sponsor.
Joe Deere sponsor. Okay. Anybody?
Okay, I do have some
Okay,
questions.
all right.
Which I understand, I'm a sponsor on the act, you know, as chair of the Education Committee, and as an educator myself, I deeply understand how important our early childhood programs are. And, you know, I had kids who went through Head Start. I myself am a Head Start graduate. And so one of the concerns that I have is about the consolidation of the early childhood and child care units, largely because early childhood, the Head Start, has a mission of education, whereas child care, while there may be educational components, it's a bit of a different mission. So my specific question is, with the consolidation of these two units, are we looking at a new department, or are we looking at placing Head Start under Human Services or child care under Education, or what does that consolidation look like?
Sure, those are excellent questions. I think as a threshold matter, it's important to recognize that it's not unusual for within a particular department for there to be programs that are slightly different on mission, but they're within an umbrella so that the sort of holistic view of that particular larger mission is managed under one apparatus, if you will. I try to look at the organization of Cherokee Nation government as, if we were starting from scratch, how would we do it? Or why did we originally sort of have things in different parts of the organizational chart? It would be a little difficult to imagine starting child care and early childhood education and saying these should be in completely different departments with completely different structures up to an ED. That would strike me as, if we were starting from scratch, perhaps not the first instinct of sort of how we get to organization. So that's kind of how I looked at this. I also want to say that we've taken a pretty deliberate approach about this. We do reorgs all the time in the Cherokee Nation, nothing this significant, I think, impacting this many people and families. So our thought was, the executive order in 2022 asked a task force to look at that. They did look at that, and the look resulted in a report which was made publicly available and put to this body. It's acknowledged in the opener of the legislation. The substantive provision that is of concern is in Section 4A, so to direct the council's attention to that, and it authorizes the principal chief at his or her discretion beginning next year to consolidate the administration of Head Start and Child Development Centers in order to maximize the resources. Significantly, it also says that there's a commitment to not reduce child care services or non-administrative staffing, so we don't want to displacement employees. To be more responsive to your question, I think putting them under a single umbrella that takes care of kids, and there's different ways to take care of kids and provide education to kids, is administratively the better way to go in terms of how do you manage something that is within the general subject matter of taking care of kids early in their life. These services provide, as you say, different levels of education. Certainly Head Start's mission is education. Their funding sources are different. But the task force looked at it, I've looked at it, and it does seem to me that's going to be the most efficient way going forward to provide this kind of care. We'll still do it, but it does seem to me doing it under one umbrella makes more sense than, say, if you had health and you started putting them under different ED structures. Managing that, I think, is more difficult than managing it through a single ED. As to where it would go, I think we're open-minded about that, and we've been looking at the pros and cons of where this would go. Human Services, where Child Development Center set, or in education, where Head Start sets. But having them under two different executive directors, I don't think is particularly good in terms of efficiency or the best use of resources.
Okay. I think that maybe, like I said, I'm a product of Head Start. I've got kids who are products of Head Start, and I have a lot of, love for that Head Start programming, largely because it is just, it truly is a Head Start for our citizens. And I understand that Cherokee Nation is very dedicated to early childhood education, in whether we're talking about child development or Head Start itself. I have a little concern that it doesn't appear that there was Head Start representation on the task force. However, if there's still continued talk about how this umbrella is going to function and where it's going to land, then I will defer to the executive directors and the consultation that's going to continue to happen on that umbrella. And I will also note there is a Scrivener's error in 4A. It should read DIS for discretion instead of DES.
Very good. And if I could respond to some of the comments, I appreciate that. The task force did engage Head Start in a dialogue and got feedback on the subject of consolidation. We tasked that department with listing the cons and also the pros so we could understand the pitfalls of consolidating, but also see if we could all recognize some reasons to do it. And I think sort of the comprehensive view of all of that led me to the conclusion that I'd like the authority to do it. I will say this, as an ordinary course, the principal chief, as I say, does have the authority to do lots of reorgs. This one seemed like one that required more public disclosure, more public discussion through this council. And so I just want you all to know the spirit with which I bring this forward is to have a lot of discussion on this. I think there needs to be. The other part of this act, though, significantly is to meet the funding requirements of the capital projects that we've committed to. We just can't do what we committed to do with the funding level that was in there. So that's the other part of the act where we need to make sure that it's enacted if at all possible.
Well, I appreciate your thorough and thoughtful response, and I yield my time, Chair.
Anybody? Councilman Callison.
I don't really have a question. I will say, if you didn't read the 26 or so pages that came out with the report, it really opens up. Being an educator for 42 years, the type of strife that each one of these, a lot of these kids go through, the percentage, how the percentage goes up on Native American kids compared to normal kids. And being a public educator, this gets them an opportunity to be ready to start once they hit the floor, because there's just so much going on. And I thought the report was very good. I don't know if it was in-house or we hired somebody to get it out, but I know that when Tara Lee sent this to us a week or so ago, that the report was really good and really gives us a lot of information about children. Because, sometimes we want to look the other way, but educating children and the things they go through is really, really important to get them up to where they're at in adulthood. And this kind of molds them. I mean, I've had several, went through the Leader in Me at Pryor Public Schools, and this gives us an opportunity to really push, and the money that we're putting through. I know we're getting a new one in Pryor that's moving along, talk of one. In other places is a very essential thing for our kids, because if we don't get them early, we don't get them at all by the time they get to high school. So this is a good thing. Thank you.
Anybody else? Sasha.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. And as we are moving forward on this, Councilor Teehee talked about the task force. I would also like to see that communication and that involvement from the Head Start staff, to see them included where they can have input and feedback regarding what's going on with our youth. This is our foundation. I'm a very strong Head Start advocate as well. But also reading that document, also, I know I spoke with Deputy Secretary before, when it talks about the childcare deserts, with CNB being a 24-hour facility, but also so is the hospital. We're building this brand-new facility. We could look at that as a recruitment and retention tool for our healthcare staff, our patients, when you look at the number of employees with CMB versus what the new hospital is going to bring, to me, that's a no-brainer that we need health or childcare here as well. But more importantly, I would like to see Head Start included with this and involved with that task force to have some representation as well.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if I could respond, I think that's a fair request, and although we engaged Head Start, to have them on a higher level in further engagement is something we can commit to. The task force sort of had a life and it concluded, but we do need to continually engage the task force so we can do that, and I appreciate gesturing to Deputy Secretary Montgomery, who really spearheaded so much of this, and I appreciate it, and she'll often tell me to go look in the report when I have questions in a nice way. But there's lots of good information there. With respect to on-site childcare, the Hard Rock childcare really, I think, is got to be the beginning, not the end, of worksite childcare expansion. That's a commitment of in the neighborhood of $30 million. It's not inexpensive, but it is a great investment. And so I think looking at particularly healthcare and trying to locate it in close proximity. In fact, one of your colleagues, Councilor Black Fox, sent an email just recently on that subject, so I know there's great interest in it, and we'll continue to look at that. And perhaps the task force can look further into opportunities to do things closer to the workforce. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Councilwoman Coates.
Hi. I just picked up on your remark a moment ago that reorgs are, that absolutely the administration has the authority to do those without coming to council, et cetera, et cetera. And so I appreciate the transparency, and that's not even a good word for it, but just to be, to keep us informed and in the loop. But it did raise a question for me, because this is legislation, and so this is a reorg that's being codified, basically. And so I was wondering, and I may have kind of figured it out for myself, but I think this legislation originally is passed for funding purposes, to establish funding sources and so forth. And so is this a reorg that needs to be codified for that purpose? Is that the rationale for doing this so formally and setting it pretty firmly in stone rather than doing an informal internal reorg?
Well, Mr. Speaker, if I could respond, I don't believe it's necessary for the funding part of it. I don't look at it as necessarily precedent setting, because I don't think the council would want to be burdened with the large number of reorgs that are of much less impact. It does seem to me we had a report. I would like the authorization by the council to next fiscal year do that. We could defer the entire thing to the appropriations process. I mean, the truth of the matter is, if the council did something with appropriations to limit a particular reorg, the council would have the authority to do that there. This is in the spirit of, let's make sure the council understands what is going on here. We could accomplish it in a number of different ways. If this language didn't exist, we would still come to you. This, though, obligates the executive branch to formally notify this body 30 days before we do anything, which I thought was a particular benefit to the council, so that if there are some concerns as we go through perhaps an extended task force, or if there's more thought laid upon this subject, that the council could say, look, we've thought about it more, and because we have this notice, we want to hit the brakes, or we think this is a good thing. So I don't know if that's responsive to the council lady's question. It's a good question, but I looked at it as just necessary given the gravity of the potential move.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you, sir. Let's see. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, number 4. Dora, would you take that, please?
An act establishing Title 73, Chapter 2 of the Cherokee Nation Code, and I put this in the form of a motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, there's no discussion. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see you. Go ahead.
I asked Shelley to put this together so that we could see what the changes were, because this is an act establishing, I think the first thing I got was amending something. I'm confused about this because when I see what the differences are, there's still an awful lot of black text in here, which seems to me like more of an amendment than a repeal and replace on this whole thing. So that's my first comment. I'm a sponsor on this, and I guess I wasn't quite understanding it in the same way that apparently the AG and Mr. Young are understanding this as a repeal and replace. Am I understanding correctly?
A.G. Harshaw.
Yeah, if I could, it is a repeal and replace of the existing law, and I think one of the things to consider with this piece of legislation is that the law as it was when it was passed previously and now is very unique in the sense that it establishes an independent commission that serves for a finite amount of time. Once the commission was formed, once the decision as to whether or not a change to the Constitution was warranted, once that matter was submitted to the Election Commission for a vote of the people, 6 months from that date of the vote was certified, the 1999 Constitution Convention Commission was no more. There was no action that can occur under the law to bring that commission back to action. It is done. It has served its statutory purpose. The only way that that matter gets addressed further is if you have a different commission that's established at a different point in time, which the Constitution provides several ways that that could be done. One is through referendum question, which is what you have in front of you under this legislative act and the following resolution. That is the way by which a Constitution Convention is established, and it's established for that period of time. So the discussions that I had with counsel for the tribal council was, how do we handle this in the form of this legislation, being that it is a unique law, a law that is on the books but technically no longer has any force or is no longer valid because the period of time by which it existed is expired, if that answers your question. So what you have in front of you is a repeal and replace of the old law with a new law that is substantially similar to accomplish the purpose of a Constitution Convention, should one be called by a vote of the people.
I came onto the council in 2007, which was the year, I believe, when we started doing staggered terms. But I was a voter, and I was politically involved even before that. And I do recall that at that time, when we only had an election once every 4 years, that our election commission was disbanded, right, within approximately the same time frame after an election occurred. And I don't think, maybe I'm wrong about this, but that new legislation was being passed every time for a new election commission to be established, 3 years later when another upcoming election was about to happen. Can you verify if I'm understanding that correctly, maybe? And if so, what would be the difference here?
I think there's a significant difference as to the comparison of the Election Commission versus this. The Election Commission is a component of our Constitution that has to exist for the purposes of conducting election under the constitutional powers vested to it. The Convention Commission is a creature of the Constitution that exists for the sole and limited purpose of evaluating whether or not changes to the Constitution should happen. So looking at it in a more broader sense, under our Constitution, there's 3 ways that a Constitution can be changed. It can be changed by a two-thirds vote of the council submitted to a vote of the people. It can be changed by the petition process, or it can be changed through a Constitution Convention that is mandated once, or the question to be asked at least once every 20 years. And so it's different than what you see with other acts because the Election Commission has to have a framework under the Constitution for it to operate and perform those continuing duties. A Constitution Convention exists for a finite amount of time and cannot, through any law, be revived, and it has to be created anew through legislation. And so again, this is somewhat tricky in the way that it exists in our code, and I think it's tricky. It's a unique provision, I think, of any Constitution. And so what has been presented is a repeal and replace of an old law that, whether or not it's on the books, is no longer valid. And I know we're getting into the weeds of the procedural piece here, but that is the reasoning why it is presented in the form that it is through discussion with counsel for the tribal council.
Well, as I say, the devil is in the details, that being the weeds, I guess, on this particular thing. And so would the same thing happen on this one if we were to do another constitutional convention, that this commission that would be established by this legislation would also sunset, and then we would need another revise or repeal and replace in the future, or?
I think so. I think that, once it sunsets, it's okay if it continues to be kind of an archaic law in the code. But once it sunsets and it serves its purpose legislatively, the only way that a convention could continue is if it were called again through the constitutional triggers that are unique to that component. So I think it's okay to codify, but I think it'll carry the same force of being no longer valid once the sunset period is triggered.
Would you see any value in revising this in a way that would continue that process rather? I mean, the actual, similar to the Election Commission in the past, the actual commission might not continue on, but there would, the process for reestablishing a new commission would be incorporated as part of this, so that we were not repealing and replacing every so often. Could that be
I think
effective?
that under the Constitution, the only way a convention can happen is if it's called by a vote of the people. And it specifically references in there that no law shall be passed unless the question is answered in the affirmative. And so I think it would be, I don't know that it would be particularly helpful to keep a law that governs a certain convention that occurs at a certain period of time in perpetuity. I think it would be up to the elected tribal council at that point in time to define what that process would look like and what that organic act would look like, governing what a convention would look like if it were elected to happen again in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm not sure I agree, but it makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Kidwell.
General Harshaw, thank you for being here today. I know you've been working hard the last many months on all this stuff. I share some of the concerns that Councilwoman Dr. Coates was bringing up, and we talked about those offline. A few of the questions and concerns that I had, I know you and the executive branch and many other folks have answered those. I will say this: some of the changes from the last many years ago that you made that I truly appreciate is, number one, the 60-day trigger. If the Cherokee Nation citizenry does respond in the affirmative and say we need this to happen, that quick timeline, I think, is going to be very appreciative to everyone involved, and I am glad that you put that in there. So some of the changes are really good. I kind of understand the legacy part of that Dr. Coates is talking about, and putting this, keeping these established and keeping them moving. But as we go along today, as we kind of jump this initial hurdle and put it out in front of the people, I think what you have is pretty good. I look forward to seeing what the Cherokee citizens have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Condesa.
Ultimately, I don't think any of us are finding the bones of what's being proposed where the contention lies. I think that ultimately what we're looking at is whether or not that previous sunset language is encoded in some way. So we're kind of looking at what our predecessors did. I think for me, my questions come, I'm not an attorney. I was, elected by the people of District 2 to come here and represent them. And so I am failing to understand how language just disappears, essentially. And it's going to be extremely difficult for me to communicate to some of my citizens in District 2, specifically some of my elders, like, why did this language disappear? Where did it go? When there's a document that's been prepared here that shows us kind of the differences between what we're enacting today and what what sunset in the past. So I think, you know, you've touched on this procedural issue, and if I'm out in the weeds here, if this isn't germane to the discussion, if I'm the only one who has this issue, I'm happy to, you know, set it aside and abstain on this vote. But I just genuinely do not understand why the language disappears.
So maybe a way to describe it a little easier is we brought through after McGirt many code revisions to our criminal code. And those were amendments to a code that was active law in the Cherokee Nation. That's why it was amending the code for this particular session. You can't amend the Organic Act for the 1999 Constitution Convention because it is no longer valid law. It is historic law that served for a period of time to accomplish the constitutional duties that it was required to do. And so it is, you know, redlining a law that's no longer valid is not something that you typically do in a legislative, pushing legislation across through a body. You know, the reason why it's in the book, it has to be repealed and replaced, is because it was codified in there. Now, the question of whether or not we should codify this temporary law is something that maybe would be more, I think, more germane to this conversation, as opposed to whether or not we amend a law that's no longer valid. You can't amend a law that is no longer in effect. There's nothing to amend.
So when the law is no longer in effect, the wording, everything associated with it, just poof, disappears.
I mean, but for the fact that we codified this, and I can't answer the question as to why it was codified or why it wasn't some years ago, but that is the law that's reflected in the book, whether it's, despite the fact that it's not still valid. But amending a law that is no longer in effect is a highly unusual thing to do, and that's why I didn't do so in this legislation that I presented to you. And I believe that it has been submitted to you in its proper form. And if there's questions about whether this should be codified in the next round, maybe we should have a conversation about procedurally what that looks like. But in terms of the way it's presented, I believe it's appropriate.
Okay, well, thank you for shedding, or thank you for enlightening me on your perspective on that. As Attorney General, clearly I'm not an attorney. I can't, you know, find fault with your legal reasoning because I don't have that legal training and that legal background. I still, you know, and I understand, I think I understand what you're saying. It's still, as a layperson, you know, as a layperson, I may have a PhD, but I don't have a JD. So it's still tough for me to grasp what is so objectionable about the item that was prepared that shows the law that's no longer in effect. That one, like I said, I might have to go to law school to understand that one. So I will set my questions aside and yield my time.
Victoria.
Yes, thank you. Mr. AG, don't we sunset laws frequently or from time to time in other instances?
I think we do in the terms of budgetary matters. I mean, the budget exists for a finite period of time, but they're not codified either because you don't typically codify those types of laws, in my opinion. And so every legislative act that comes through the budget or a budget modification has a finite amount of time by which it applies and subject to a new budget being approved down the road. None of those are typically codified, and perhaps maybe that's where we should spend some time having conversation as we move through codification, is what are the parameters for codifying something and what are the parameters for not. But the reality that we have a document that has been codified into our current books, and that has to be repealed and replaced with the revised language.
Thank you.
Councilman Callison.
A.G. Harsha, I'm in agreement that the 60 days is great. When you say this committee, so they're going to have to go from California to New York to Texas to across the reservation in 60 days with these meetings, or have they already got some kind of a plan about how that we will conduct these? I mean, this is going to be basically expensive and pretty time-consuming for 60 days to get people, because we do have 460,000 Cherokees across from one side of the
So
country to the other.
as a point of clarification, the 60-day requirement is directed towards the committee or the commission forming and starting to do official action. So what the legislation reads is that 60 days from a vote being affirmative and certified by the election commission, within 60 days, the individuals who are going to serve on that commission shall be appointed through the processes with respect to the council, with respect to the chief's office appointment, and the judiciary. And then they will move forward, once that group is formed, to establish what the rules are by which they're going to conduct public engagement. And so it could possibly take longer than 60 days from that point, but that'll be a decision made by the commission once established.
Anybody else? Dora?
Just a comment with all due respect. The Durban Feeling Act would have sunset had it not had been renewed. And then also the Housing and Jobs Act will sunset after 3 years. So that's just a little tidbit there. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, that'll end discussion. Let's vote. All in favor? All opposed? Vote carries. Okay. Number 5. Councilman Easley, take that, please.
There's a resolution authorizing a ballot question on a Constitution Convention and setting a special election. Put this in the form of a motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Number 6, Councilman Coates, take that, please.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I was going to throw this.
So much other stuff.
I was going to throw this at you just for a second.
You got to do this one.
This is discussion and possible action on a proposed amendment to the Rules of Procedure governing the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council. And since we've got overwhelming sponsorship on this, I'm going to just make this in the form of a motion that we adopt the one small change that's here. Yeah. Need a second?
Second. May I make a friendly regarding to something that was left out? And this is under item, well, where it lists the different departments.
What
So
page
page
is it?
11.
Which one?
Culture Committee is not listed, and I would like to make a friendly that we would add it as item J after health.
Again, what page? I'm sorry.
Page 11
Okay.
of the part that's in our book.
That what be added again?
Yes, if we could add item J after health to show the Culture Committee, because it's not in here.
Oh, yes, I would accept that,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
I need a second for, just to accept, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Kidwell.
I don't have anything to add, really, but I will say that putting this together and working on our rules is, our internal policies is near and dear to my heart. I'm so glad that we're doing this. I have about 30 friendlies I would like to go through at this point, but I'm very glad. I'm not going to do that to everybody right now today, but I'm glad that we're getting these out. I'm just look to see more of these in the future. There's so many small things that we can fix in our own policies or procedures, things that we're already doing that we haven't really put in here, and it'd be nice to update those. I'll be working on those in the future, but I appreciate Dr. Coates and everyone else for getting on this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, number 7, Councilman Vasquez, would you take that, please?
Certainly. This is back up for new business item number 7, discussion and possible action to accept the principal chief's invitation to appoint council leadership to an executive/legislative redistricting work group. Put that in the form of a motion.
We have a motion and a second. We'll open it up for discussion. I will say this, back several years ago when this came up, we had a work group to discuss these things. Honestly, don't remember the work group ever meeting, but I did make a request to then General Harshaw, who was over Natural Resources, to get the map process started. He did that. So now we're at the point in time where, this needs to be done. And what I did, I had talked with Chief Hoskin and asked him, said, look, this is coming up, and from what I read about it and people who were involved in it, it was very kind of crazy time, tough time, redistricting. So I asked for some help. I also went to the AG, Mr. Harshaw, talked to him, and also Natural Resources, because we are going to have to work together to make this thing work out. I mean, because they are obviously, the Natural Resource obviously is going to have to give us the maps and things like that. And that, in my understanding, there are some maps already available. So this basically gets things rolling from where we were. I look for there to be, if and when we pass this, I look for there to be a committee made that it will supersede the work group, because the work group was just to give suggestions to the council. Well, this committee will have the ability to make decisions and move forward on this. So I think the wheels are all in place to do this. If you're wondering why things have kind of progressed to where they are, it's because that's just the people I talked to, and that's who I asked help from. So I think this working together is the best solution to do anything. And at this point, I think when we do committees and we do start appointing people, it'll be very important for the council, I think, to appoint people who don't have a vested interest. They are termed out, or they would gain nothing from the redistricting. I think we need to keep that in mind when we appoint people. So, but to go forward today, I hope you agree that this is something that needs to be done. It is going to be difficult and time-consuming, but I think this would be the first step in getting councilmen to come in and view the maps, because they are able to do that now. So we can start pulling people in and to start viewing the districts and see what the changes are. It's going to be daunting, but, the sooner we start it, I think the better. So.
Ask a question.
Yes.
To the council.
Yes.
Is any council member here really wanting to change their district? Okay, that's what I want to know. I want to know if anybody was.
Well, I will say this. I'm not going to open it up for everybody just to say yes or no, but I think we're in time where we have to go through redistricting now. We're past time doing that. Is that correct? So that is something procedurally that we need to do, that we are supposed to do. So that's how I would answer that. Councilman Kidwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, my answer to that, obviously I know that my lines aren't going to change, but I would say that it's the data that changes the lines, not any council members or any person's desire. The data shows where things should be, and that's why we do the meeting. While we're discussing, I appreciate the thing, and I appreciate everybody leaning forward on this. I know we'd talked about this many times, months ago, and we knew this has been coming, and we've been really getting ready for it. And the legwork is admirable, and I appreciate everybody leaning forward. Has there been any thought ever, while we're discussing, to having an outside independent body do redistricting for us, to take politics out of this, to make no, where there's no view of outside or inside interference whatsoever? I know some states do that. I know do it that way, but that as we're discussing things and moving forward, it might be an idea. And also, in your discussions with the executive branch and others on this working group, how many do you think was going to be what was the idea of the number of people we would be putting on this work group?
We were talking 2 to 3.
2 to 3
Per-
from the council, from the thing,
Yes,
for each one?
yes.
Okay. So it'd be what? So a few, 9 or so?
And,
okay.
and, you know, really, that group, everything leads up to the actual getting to the nuts and bolts of looking at the maps and looking at the population and seeing where it changed and getting with the councilman. I think this all leads up to that. In the end, whatever happens, if you have 50 people looking at it, if you have 12, 9, this council is going to have to approve this. And you each are going to have to go in there and look at these in this redistricting, and you know, you're going to have input. And I think regardless of whether we have 9, 12, or 50, in the end, it's going to be our decision. And I think it's going to put it in our hands to understand that, first of all, are we doing a disservice to our people, possibly? Are we just doing a disservice to our councilmen by changing something that would be detrimental to them doing their jobs? Or is it going to make it better? I mean, you know, there's a lot of questions that are going to be asked just by the changes. And I'll tell you, I haven't seen them. I know that they're ready to start showing people that. And until we get a better look at that, it's going to be hard to see where those big changes have come from. I think I have a pretty good idea where some of them have come from. So some of the questions are hard to ask. I think it's all going to get us to the point where we're just going to get in the nuts and bolts of it and see where the biggest changes are going to come from and how that affects everybody else. I mean, it's difficult to answer that question until we look at it. And then I think when you look at it, you'll have a very good idea.
Someone will.
Absolutely.
Someone will have a very
And
good idea.
everybody will, because, you know, you're all going to get to look at it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know, 5 of the right people are better than 50 of the wrong. I mean,
That's
it just,
right.
you move things along a little bit. I mean, so I like I said, I appreciate everybody leaning forward and moving out. I mean, it's not exactly the way I would have worded everything, but if it gets us moving in the right direction, we can clean all that up later down the road.
Anybody else? Julia?
Yeah, I've sort of said in my mind that I would stay out of the redistricting thing since it doesn't affect me, but when I think about questions that are constitutional questions and policy questions and sort of not the nuts and bolts of doing this, but the 30,000-point view of the practice, you know, and the theory behind redistricting, I'm really uncomfortable with this for a couple of reasons. And it's, this is something, and I was saying to some people before we started sessions today, I was around in 2013. I know the chief was as well, right? And this was probably the nastiest drag down, knockdown, drag out, whatever that we ever experienced on in council. And so I do tend to agree with just an independent commission. Now, that would be a constitutional change, I think, so we can't just decide to do that. But it might be something to look forward to, because, I mean, my other residence is in a state that does it that way, and boy, I think if it wasn't done that way, it would be as bad in California as it is in many states where the gerrymandering is extreme and you know, and things do become so divisive, and there you just have knockdown dragouts everywhere. So I would really just suggest that, you know, maybe with the Constitutional Convention, if that is brought by the citizens, that this might be something for consideration. Until then, I do think our Constitution is very clear that this is a legislative branch function, period. And so I mean, I'm hearing 3 people from the council and then 6 from what? Because this only mentions the executive. Is the judicial also being included in this? Is that my understanding? Or, so I'm unclear. But if we go from 15 people, 17 people ultimately, but 15 who have a real interest in this, to having 12 of those people basically being non-participatory in the process, yes, they'll be able to look at it, you know, before final votes and make changes and so forth. But boy, my experience from 2013 is that every member of this body will have thoughts. And, you know, this seems like a tremendous reduction of council influence to do it that way. And even if it is determined to do it this way, we should be the body extending the invitation, right? That's my, yeah. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Well, I'll just respond by saying I don't get caught up in the words of this. I know where we're going. I know what this means. I have the floor, Councilman. Yes, I do. And you're not recognized at this point. But also, my thoughts are, we could bring outside people in, but, you know, we are the Cherokee Nation. I honestly don't feel like we need to. I think this is something we can do on our own. Could it work? I'm sure it could, but I just honestly don't see the need to do that. I think we can handle our own business, and I think we can definitely handle this, and I don't think this takes anything away from the judicial branch at all, because in the end, this basically just gets things started. In the end, we will be the ones who make the decision. This body will be the ones who make the decision on what happens. Candace.
I think at some point, Principal Chief had indicated something, there was a comment about the judicial, and I didn't know if you had sought to respond. I don't want to step in front of you if you had.
I was going to express the spirit with which the executive branch is coming forward, and I can defer that to any other questions or comments. I can respond to the part about the judiciary as well, but I could defer if you had other questions.
Okay, yeah, if you might find it more beneficial to respond at the end of.
Sure, yeah, I'll be ready
At the end
to
of questions,
respond.
okay. Well, I understand the point that is being made when we're looking at the language on a discussion and possible action item. It is not the language that's going to be voted on by the body for the final action item itself. So I understand that point there, but I also understand the point that was raised by our one of our fine at-large counselors, that words do matter, and that the redistricting is the legislative is imbued by the Constitution with the authority to act on redistricting. With that being said, I do get a bit wary thinking about everyone having the ability to weigh in on their district lines. And I do think about also the point that's been raised that these district lines should be guided by demography and demographic changes rather than our personal preferences for our own districts, because sometimes the issue at hand can become a little bit blurry when you start adding in some of those personal interests. As a representative for District 2, people have joked around that Districts 1, 2, and 3 in Tahlequah form a pinwheel. And when you look at our map, it looks a little funny. And so we all understand that our district lines are going to change and that we may not be the ones who have final input on what those district lines look like. And so in that interest, I do think that a targeted number of individuals guiding this process, and specifically, I think council leadership, our speaker, our deputy speaker, and our secretary, because each of you are termed out. So you don't have, I don't want to say you don't have a dog in the fight, because you do, but I do trust the three of you and your judgment on this particular item, on this redistricting item. And I do feel comfortable as an action item having you three have the ultimate authority on what's being presented to council, and then us kind of looking at that finished product rather than us trying to go in and adjust lines, because boy, that would get contentious fast. So those are some of my thoughts on the item. And on our final action item, I agree that if anyone's doing the invitation to the working group, it should be the legislative.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I can't agree saying that, that people are going to have influence over what they want their district to be. This goes by population. Nobody here is going to dictate their own district. They're not, but you will have input. And I think that's important that everybody has input on it. But no one person is going to get to dictate that. It'll go by population. Councilman Easley.
Thank you, Speaker. Councilor Legg asked, does anybody want to lose their district? I think everybody here, I know me, I sure don't. I love the people in my district, and I worked hard to get here, and it's their district. I understand that. This is their seat, but those are my people, and I don't want to lose them. But at the end of the day, I don't trust some outside source coming in here telling us what to do. I don't like that idea at all. We're Cherokee Nation. We can figure it out. And, I respect at-large counselors' input on this, but to be fair, we're the ones on the chopping block over here. I'm okay with this. Do I like the wording of it? No. I agree with Councilor Teehee. Invitation should have been from the legislature. But at the end of the day, this is a work group, and we're all going to get say on this. We're not sitting here voting on, some FISA court that's going to make a decision for us, and we have to all abide by it. It's a work group. This is the very beginning of the process, and I support it.
Anybody else? Chief, anything you have to add, or?
Well, I don't know if I have to, but I will if I'm invited.
Go ahead.
I did want to express briefly the spirit with which the executive branch comes to this. I did reach out to the Speaker with some concerns about redistricting. I do want to say very clearly, the executive branch is the secondary branch in redistricting. The technical role of the chief is to sign or veto, and I've never vetoed anything, legislation that would enact a change to the map. The practical role for the executive branch, and Councilor Coates and I did go through this, and it was a really difficult time that I don't want to repeat if I can be helpful. The practical role of the executive branch before my signature, which is the end of the process, is providing technical expertise, providing people who can understand the legal requirements. Let's remember, what drives us on redistricting is not that we want to change districts. It's, number one, population. And then as you look at population changes, you also, this is a legal principle, communities of interest. So you could draw a bunch of straight lines down a map and get the population you want, but it may not make a lot of sense in terms of communities of interest, which take into account all sorts of things, geography, other political boundaries, actual communities, all sorts of things. That's the real difficulty of the process. So it's a difficult process that requires some expertise, which we happen to house in the executive branch. It's primarily our GIS people. It's primarily our registration folks, our IT people who can produce a really important number. And this is really where redistricting starts. What's the population within the reservation? Divide it by 15. That's the median optimal district. And we know what our own courts say and what the federal courts say is that you have to stay within 5% either side of that magic number, which is a 10% stretch, of course. And so that will help inform how maps are drawn. But we can figure out population pretty quick. It's the communities of interest that council members are uniquely positioned to know. And then objectively, everybody can look at a map and say, well, boy, there's a natural boundary. So my role in my executive branch function, our executive branch function is really supportive. And so the invitation was in the nature of the demographics seem by any objective standard to have changed a great deal since the last redistricting. They just have. We have new, every day, new data on our citizens as far as population and where they live. If we don't act, and no one here is suggesting we don't act, but if we don't act, then we could be out of legal compliance with the population. And then we've been through that too when the courts are in a position to sort of try to figure out what a map should be or to force our hands when we really ought to sort of take this. So the invitation was really, Mr. Speaker, as you know, offered in the spirit of we've got resources to help. We do have an obligation, even as principal chief, to say if we have any litigation over this, then we'll feel like we didn't do our job saying, let's get moving. And so it's really a supportive role. It's a secondary role. And I appreciate the genuine sensitivities around language, but I am really here to offer support as a secondary branch in this really unique function. And so there's not going to be a lineup of cabinet officials on one side of a table and 3 of you. It's going to be whatever number, but if it's 3, the 3 leaders with staff that knows how to do things I can't do, which is to punch in the numbers and say, here's a map, if you did it optimally, and here's what your current map looks like. We've got people that can do that, and it's going to be of great benefit to you. And then how the process goes along between now and the next committee meeting is, it could be a situation where council members come in and say, how does my district look if it was drawn this way? That process will all benefit the necessary and essential public discussion of this process. But I can tell you, having gone through the 2013 difficulties, I think this is a better way to go, with support of the executive branch, with our staff there at the table, and then you all telling us what you want. And that's the spirit with which this was brought, Mr. Speaker, and it always will be.
Anybody else? And that's what I envisioned when we had the discussion, when I had the discussion with the 3 different entities. We're going to have to work together to make it better and make it easier, because the last one lasted forever, and it was not a good thing. All right, let's vote. All in favor? All opposed? All right, motion carries. Are there any announcements? Oh, I don't have it. I don't have it. Oh, I do have it.
Speaker.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, EO. Hold it. Did you have a, we'll get announcements here in a minute. Yeah, I've got it here. No, I don't. Okay. Okay, yes. Dora, do you have the floor?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to make an amendment to the agenda to include an act to amending Title 68, Chapter 5, Section 71 of the Cherokee Nation Code annotated, and yes, I put that in the form of a motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the agenda to add Title 68, Chapter 5 to it. Is there any discussion? That's what Attorney General Harshaw had briefed us on earlier. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, now, do we have any announcements? Oh, my bad. I'm trying to get out of here, aren't I? All right. All right, we did vote on amending the agenda. Now we're going to vote on the actual item. All right, all in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Motion?
Motion made, an act to amending Title 68, Chapter 5, Section 71 of the Cherokee Nation Code annotated.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. Now, are there any announcements? EO.
Just real quick, we have our history class down at Vine tonight. We had one last week, and everybody really enjoyed it. Tonight at 6 o'clock, Catherine Foreman Gray
A little ahead of
doing a
myself.
great job on history. So come down and join us, 6 o'clock at Vine. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, need one more motion. Motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed? We're adjourned.